Gonna blood the come quick, been another murder.
What was that, Carruthers? Could you repeat that?
Gonna blood the come quick, been another murder.
I think he's trying to tell us that there's been another murder.
Once the comedy troupe The League of Gentlemen went on hiatus in 2006, after their feature film and second live tour, half of the writing and performing team, Reece, Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, decided to continue writing together and started developing characters for a new project. No, this isn't yet another video telling you that no one is talking about Inside Number 9. Although, it probably is nothing in the grand scheme of TV criticism on YouTube. I'm going to be talking about Pemberton and Shearsmith's previous show, the far more obscure Psychoville. Psychoville follows 5 mentally disturbed individuals living across the UK as they all get a letter from a mysterious man in black saying, "I know what you did." Personally, I think that alone may well convince you to check out the show. Like Inside Number 9, the less you know about the plot the better, but if you don't want to go in completely blind, I'll introduce you to the cast. First off, Dawn French plays Joy, a midwife who trains young couples during their antenatal classes and has an unsettling attachment to the doll she uses in demonstrations.
Ah, Nels! Don't touch him!
Bleeding.
And he might have brain damage. What did I just tell you about supporting the head?
It's only a doll.
Not for much longer. Not for much longer.
Then there's Mr. Jelly, played by Shearsmith, a cantankerous alcoholic children's birthday party clown whose business was destroyed when an aspiring clown took advantage of the loss of his hand.
You're still a children's entertainer, aren't you?
Oh, I know. I'm Dr. Harold Shipman. Of course I'm a children's entertainer. Or you think this is a tattoo?
Next, there's the blind old millionaire Oscar Lomax, played by Pemberton, who relies on his carer Tea Leaf to help him in search of his commodities.
Very valuable commodities. You're not going to ask me what commodities?
What commodities?
I'm not telling you.
Then there's Robert, played by Jason Tompkins, an actor in a panto of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, who secretly lashes out at others with his telekinetic powers.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
And finally, there's David Sourbuts, played by Pemberton, a dim-witted man-child and true crime enthusiast who lives with a smothering mother, Maureen, played by Shearsmith. You may be confused by the suffix of this title and assume that all of these crazy characters live in the same town, rather than being spread across the country. But the title actually comes from the title they gave the League of Gentlemen in Japan and South Korea, which is about the strange inhabitants of a northern town. Which begs the question, what do they call Psychoville in Japan then? I imagine that keeping those characters so far away from each other was at least partially the result of playing multiple characters in a day in the League of Gentlemen's apocalypse. Seriously, when you watch Pemberton's video diary, where he and Shearsmith go back to the makeup trailer to get changed into themselves, only to arrive and find that the day's filming had ended and they used doubles instead, you can practically feel the frustration and disappointment through the screen. Anyway, as always, Pemberton and Shearsmith not only knock it out of the park with their writing, but with their acting, with each of them playing 4 roles of varying sizes in Series 1. They disappear into them so seamlessly that you don't really need to make that much of an effort to suspend your disbelief whilst you're watching the show, including when they play female characters. Although, obviously, the incredible costume and makeup department certainly help. Hats off to Eve Barr for the former, by the way. As for the rest of the cast, Dawn French is perfect as Joy. She really captures both the humour and tragedy of the character really well, and the soft Bristolian accent she uses in this is just right. She was actually a big reason the series got greenlit, as she was a household name due to her hit shows French and Saunders and Vicar of Dibley, giving the BBC a sense of security for this rather niche show. Daniel Kaluuya is great in a relatively understated performance as Lomax's home help Michael Fry, who Lomax nicknames Tea Leaf for his criminal past. He's something of a straight man in Lomax's storyline. You may remember Daniel Kaluuya for his role as Tucker in Johnny English Reborn. I do hope someone notices him at some point and gives him a big role in something. Jason Tompkins is great in his role as Robert, but I'm afraid he's the least memorable of the 5 main characters. That's no fault of the actor, and it's not that his storyline is dull or poorly written, but he's just an interesting character, not a funny one. Or at least not as funny as the other 4. The supporting cast of his storyline is fantastic though, such as Lisa Hammond as Kerry and Daisy Haggard as Debbie, who has just been hilarious in everything I've ever seen her in. She plays ditzy really well here. Christopher Biggins also plays himself. The whole Panto storyline is really good. The supporting cast in Mr. Jelly's storyline are also fantastic, but I don't want to go into that too much. It's not that they are big names or anything, they just come into the story a bit later. Unsurprisingly, Jelly himself is hilarious. It's that kind of disgruntled, easily irritated character that Shearsmith plays so well. Pemberton and Shearsmith went on record in 2010 saying that David and Maureen are their 2 favourite characters to have played. And it's easy to see why they are favourites of the fans too. On one hand, it's the only one of the storylines where the 2 of them are together, and therefore the only one where we see the 2 of them playing off each other. On the other, they are simultaneously comically grotesque and identifiably relatable. Maureen doesn't love her son the way a mother should, but she's a loving mother all the same, and she phrases things in a really mumsy way.
What's brought all this on, killing that man? Come here, you daft sod!
Much like Tubbs, David's grotesqueness is juxtaposed with his childlike nature that acts as a surprising gateway into sympathising with these characters. Although David is grumpy and immature, whilst Tubbs has more of a naive delight and fascination with everything.
Lines and lines and lines and lines and lines! What do they mean?
There's a deep sadness to all of these characters, as all of them are escaping some kind of tragic past. There's often something about them that is played for laughs at first, like the loss of Jelly's hand, that also becomes a source of pathos further down the line. If you are familiar with their other 2 shows, then you know this is something they can pull off very well. They will make you feel sympathy for the most revolting characters, which always impresses me. Personally, I find watching more than one episode of Inside Number 9 in one night too much. As there's so much to process as a viewer in each standalone episode, I feel like I need 24 hours to process what I've just seen. However, I watched the entire first series of Psychoville in one day, and then the entirety of Series 2 in one binge the weekend after that. It's really enjoyable. They were going for one of those sprawling drama series that was popular at the time, like 24, Lost, Heroes and Dexter, but with a comedy twist. And I, for one, was hooked. Their producer quickly realised that they wouldn't be able to achieve their vision on a typical 6-episode comedy budget. So, he asked the BBC for 7 episodes. He then asked Shearsmith and Pemberton to write a bottle episode that was just 2 characters in a room or something, that they could shoot cheaply so that they could use that extra budget on the rest of the show. As their series already happened to take a Hitchcockian tone, the 2 decided to watch Rope, and the rest, as they say, was history. It followed David and Maureen cleaning up a murder, only for a detective to arrive at the victim's apartment. They realised once they had finished writing the other 6 episodes that David and Maureen were the only characters whose backstories weren't established yet. So I'm glad that we got those major revelations in this episode. As well as having the similar plot of trying to hide a body, it also gives the illusion of being filmed in one take. It's actually filmed in 2, due to the hydraulics on the camera needing to be recharged each time. It's such an incredible achievement, especially when you consider that they filmed it in 3 days and only had one afternoon to rehearse, due to the availability of their former League of Gentlemen co-star, Mark Gatiss, who, by the way, is just perfect in this. Everything about this episode is just phenomenal. On one hand, the episode does stick out. The rest of the series is a sprawling narrative that cuts between 5 different storylines. So one that only has 3 characters set in one room in real time is quite jarring. However, it is by far the most fantastic. Besides, having it slap bang in the middle means that there's a nice change of pace, especially when you binge watch the entire series in one day. This episode is what inspired them to create their next programme, Inside Number 9, an anthology series where each episode takes place in one location. However, after some digging in preparation for this video, it turns out it may have been a bit more complex than that. You see, during a Q&A after a back-to-back screening of Rope and this episode at the Phoenix Cinema in 2010, between the end of Series 1 and the Halloween special later that year, Shearsmith revealed that the BBC was so delighted with the speed and budget in which this episode was completed that they shopped the idea of a series shot in the same manner to other writers.
There was a lot of excitement within the BBC that we'd achieved this within 2 days, so they got very above their station and sent the DVDs out to lots of comedy writers and said, we'd love to do a series of one-off playlists like this, and tried to get that off.
Various double acts were sent to the DVD and saying, would you like to do something like this? Not every f***body could do something like this.
I wouldn't be surprised if those at the Beeb did that specifically to get a rise out of Reece Shearsmith, in a sort of reverse psychology move to get them to take on the idea themselves. Because if there's one thing you can guarantee, it's that Reece Shearsmith will find something to be angry about.
Just forget about the morning. I stopped at grumpy.
Imagine Mr. Jelly with the makeup taken off. That is Reece.
What did someone call us who interviewed us? Tweedleglum and Tweedleglee.
Tweedleglum and Tweedleglee. I don't know which one was which.
I cultivate this grumpiness. I'm really, really chirpy, happy person.
I saw someone saying that the Halloween special works as a standalone episode, but I'd say there's a far better argument for this one. There's nothing that needs to be set up that you wouldn't already gather from the episode, and there's very little that would spoil the rest of Series 1, unlike the ending of the Halloween episode. Speaking of which, the Halloween special is great. It takes a similar format as the League of Gentlemen's Christmas special, You'll Never Leave, as it's a portmanteau horror with characters telling each other non-canon stories about characters from the show. Whilst the framing device is canon, but has very little impact on the main plot. It's also like The Simpsons' Treehouse of Horror, and is similarly a tad more gruesome than usual. It works as a fantastic trailer for the second series, without actually starting the second series early. Obviously, I'll say even less about Series 2, but I will say that it doesn't disappoint. The way it makes callbacks to the first series, much like the League of Gentlemen, give us a feeling that they love these characters just as much as we do, in a way that feels really satisfying as a fan, and not like pandering. I know some people thought some of the plot was a bit far-fetched, but I didn't think it was any more so than what we got in the previous series. However, I think we can all agree that the new characters are absolutely brilliant. Imelda Staunton and Jason Watkins are fantastic. If you're one of the many League of Gentlemen fans who wish that Tish was used more, then you'll love Hattie. Although she was a jumping off point, they do go in a different direction with her character to fit this show, and it really works. As for Jeremy Good, he's one of my absolute favourites of the show's run. He's funny, he's scary, he's sympathetic, and despite all the weirdness, there's something very real about him. He's probably the biggest reason I'm disappointed they didn't have a third series. I think he's the one that had the most potential for another series. Unfortunately, the second series was a massive ratings flop, with all the episodes after the first one getting less than 1 million views, killing all hopes of a third series. Which must have been emotionally devastating for Pemberton and Shearsmith. They put so much work into this series, it must have been heartbreaking. However, Series 2 had one of those series finales where everything could have ended there, but there were just enough loose threads for another series, meaning that it didn't end on a cliffhanger. It's mostly satisfying regardless. Some characters from the show would make a surprise appearance in an episode of Inside Number 9, much to the delight of fans, and driving this substantially bigger fan base to this forgotten gem of their careers. I have really mixed feelings about this episode. I'm definitely going to have to watch it again, But what I will say is, I know a lot of people did love it, and the least good episodes of Inside Number 9 are still some of the best television out there. Much like Inside Number 9, Psychoville is the opportunity to bask in the talent and genius of Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton. I don't think it's quite as brilliant, but very few shows are even remotely as good as Inside Number 9. It's just the most incredible television we've had in years. Seriously, if you haven't seen it yet, watch it! Watch it now! I think it's unfair to compare a series to more successful series that the creators have had, but Inside Number 9 is so good, Psychoville is so good, they're both fantastic. You need to watch both of them. The only advantage Psychoville has over Inside Number 9 is that, of course, we get to spend more time with these characters, and they write brilliant characters. There's also a sense of familiarity when it comes to genre and tone. You never know how an episode of Inside Number 9 is going to make you feel by the end. Amused, deeply disturbed, emotionally decimated. Whilst you could certainly never call Psychoville predictable, you have a good idea of the tone once you get into it. I also recommend it if you like The League of Gentlemen, especially Series 3, which also had a series of separate storylines that came together, even if it was only in the final scene of each episode.
It's very complicated. It's like 24, but no of them.
Personally, I find it's a lot less grotesque than League of Gentlemen, but I understand that's something that's really subjective. So if you've seen both shows, let me know what you think of them in the comments. If you are a fan of thrillers and dark comedy, then I definitely recommend checking Psychoville out. It may take an episode or two to get used to the tone, but the plot pulls you in pretty quickly. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But definitely spread the word to those who may enjoy it, because my god does this deserve a larger fan base. They also had a BAFTA award-winning alternate reality game in the form of a sprawling virtual world of blogs from the characters, which I will be exploring in a series of live streams, alongside George and Rocky from Headphones UK, Zach from Zack Attack Reviews, and Moxie from Box Office Poison, every Sunday at 8 PM GMT, so make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to make sure to join us live. It'll be like a book club, where we discuss each new episode each week, before exploring the sites in the order in which they were originally released. You can go and watch the first episode of that right here. See you soon!